There are tectonic shifts going on today. Geopolitical powers, technological marvels, linguistic abilities, changing roles in the new media landscape. What kind of media will survive and thrive? What will be the role of a changing media today and tomorrow? At the recently concluded CGTN Global Media Summit in Sanya, I posed all these questions and many more to 4 outspoken participants. Let's meet them and hear their insights. Dinara Takutsunova, Deputy Head of News at RT International. Yusuf Omar, co-founder from #OurStories. Jessica Poyce, Asian Voices Executive Editor, Huffington Post. Shi Anbing, Associate Dean of International Development with the School of Journalism and Communication at Tsinghua University. I'm so glad to be joined here in Sanya, Hainan, by 4 seasoned people in the media. I guess also people from all over the world sitting here on this panel. Let's go into the questions directly. The world is changing. How fast, we don't know, but the power is shifting. Geopolitics, if you look at the speeches given by President Trump and President Xi, both at the Davos World Economic Forum and later in APEC CEO Summit, you see the difference, at least in words. How should we see this power shift and its impact on our media landscape these days? Shall I go to you, Dinara, first?
Yes, I think that the more voices we hear in media, the better. So I think that the variety of alternative media is very important, and it's considering the big media outlets like CGTN or Al Jazeera or RT, or individual bloggers and small individual platforms. I think it's very important that now all these, there are so many voices, and I hope it will be even more.
But I wonder, Jessica would agree with that or not? I guess some of the editorial policies of Huffington Post might be different from RT.
Yeah, well, Huffington Post is openly liberal and progressive in terms of our policies.
American standard.
Yeah. Yeah. But no, of course we're wanting to welcome more voices, just as you said. I think one of the you know, and we're not alone across the American media landscape. Everyone is trying to sort of break down this divide and bring both sides together. So you see, you know, media outlets sort of you know, developing new ways to do that. HuffPost, for instance, went on a bus tour where we physically reached out to people from the South, from, you know, Middle America, people who say that they feel left out and they feel ignored by the media. You see that at different outlets. You know, BuzzFeed has a pop your bubble. You know, the get outside of your bubble,
right.
Get outside of your frame of reference that you always defer to. So you're seeing that across the media.
Professor Shi, what do you make of that geopolitical shift, as some say, and its impact on different voices that we are seeing these days in the world media landscape?
I guess this power shift is not just confined to the political and economic sphere. It also actually extended to communication sphere. And recently, this kind of power shift has been transformed to a kind of power struggle. Particularly between U.S. and Russia. I think they mutually label each other as so-called foreign agents. So this is actually a reflection of the changing landscape of global media order, because I think the rise of the West, particularly media from Russia, from China, and from other countries, has risen as a very strong discursive power, challenging the UK and the US duopoly. And also the rise of social media, like Mojo, and the moving journalists, the rise of the, especially from the grassroots, also pose the challenge to so-called elite power discourse. So I guess this power shift in media sphere happened in many different stratum.
One of the things that we see of the symptom of power shift is the debate going on inside the United States, Yusuf. You used to work for CNN as a new media reporter. So I guess you know a little bit about that so-called fake news. One say it is a struggle between the Trump administration and the media, so-called liberal media, but others suggest this is something that's been boiling for a long time. Namely, some people in the society felt they're being left out, their voices not being heard. What exactly is the nature of it, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, fake news is a term that has been weaponized to discredit many mainstream media organizations. You have a president that is effectively running a country from a Twitter account and is trying to discredit those that don't support his narrative, that are too critical of him, he might believe. Effectively, what's happened, though, is the fake news label has backfired. All it's done is make people further want to seek the truth. And if you look at the subscriptions that are going to the New York Times and organizations like this, you're seeing a generation of millennials that are finally paying for news. They're saying, hey, we're tired of all this noise on social media. We don't know what's real and what's not. Help us work out the facts from the fiction. So, yeah.
But when you are paying for the news, are you really getting the facts, or rather the fiction, too?
I think it's the responsibility of the consumer to have a real diversity of news that they consume. I think if you really want to understand what's going on in the world, you need to consume everything from CNN to RT and everything in between. If you don't, you end up in this polarized world where you're on the far left or you're on the far right, and you don't really have a good vantage point of what's really going on.
But do the consumers have to educate themselves, or they can be cultivated throughout the years by media organizations, Jessica?
Yeah, there's definitely a responsibility of media literacy, but I definitely, I agree with what you're saying exactly. We've seen, fierce competition, as a result of this fake news label, and so there's competition between media outlets, and then, we always say that the readers are the winners because there's great content that's being produced.
You see this fight literally taking place between the White House and also some of the American so-called media, liberal media outlets, that they are really into one another. That people wondered, what are the responsibilities of the White House? And what are the responsibilities of media? That they're so much intertwined, they're so much in tug of war, fascinated about only the other party, that probably people wonder many other important things are being missed out by only reporting about the tweets, or mainly reporting about the tweets of a president. Dinara.
Well, I think that the thing that happened is that mainstream media in the U.S. couldn't survive with the fact that basically Trump became a president, and you may like it or you may not like it, but that's what happened. And unfortunately, Russia and RT became the part of the game, like inter-party game in the U.S. And we've been called fake news so many times. And when we start talking...
Are you?
When I start talking to people and ask what was fake, no one can say something, because it's like the very term fake news, the very definition is like, it's such a weapon in informational wars,
Up to interpretation when it comes to so-called fake. Do you agree with that, Jessica?
Different interpretations. Yeah, I mean, Kellyanne Conway called that alternative facts, right?
Yeah.
We don't necessarily believe that alternative facts, that point of view. I think that's sort of that's dangerous territory to wade in, I would say.
So you mainly disagree with what Mr. Dinara just said?
I respectfully disagree.
I think that we very often discuss it with our colleagues, and I often say that, you can say this is like a Russian voice and you don't want to listen to it, but then it makes this diversity, right? How do you know what Russians think? How do you know the psychology of what they are doing if you don't want these sides, to be heard at all? So I think that...
So it sounds like you are very resentful to the American decision about not necessarily consider RT as part of the media landscape anymore in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, this is... really outrageous because, we also very often discuss that, and it means that they don't want to treat like us as a media
But
anymore.
then Russian president did the same thing to the American press as well.
No.
I guess they are saying this is neutral, so let's do the similar things to the American media as they were doing to the Russian media in the United States.
Yes, but the initial idea was that like Russia, like American media exists in Russia, they are fully operational, and no one ever tried to somehow call them foreign agents before it happened to RT.
Okay, Professor Shi, I see you always want to jump in and comment about that.
I just want to compliment one thing, because we talk about fake news. Actually, we use another term called post-truth. Post-truth is different from fake news in that fake news is a historical phenomenon, but post-truth is very exclusive to social media, because on the platform of social media, people just don't share information, but they actually aggregate some kind of emotion. So they tend to believe, even if it's fake, they still tend to share or believe. So today, if there's a piece of news are not shared, I don't think it's become a news. So no matter it's fake news or truthful news, but it has to be post-truth.
I think fake news and what people are going to call fake news is going to happen whether we like it or not. And the real question now is, who is the world editor? Who's going to decide that this is fake news and we must pull this off the internet and this is real? And
It seems that every one of us is making that decision. Well, we are speaking right now.
But now we're calling on, we're saying, hey, Facebook, you need to start policing your forum. We're saying, hey, Twitter. For me, that's a really dangerous space. If we start telling Facebook they need to hire editors to decide whether RT are doing fake news or whether somebody else is doing fake news, it's too much power in the hands of too few individuals. And that, for me, is risky. I think we're far better off allowing everything to go online.
But here's the thing, when we talk about power shift, are we talking about, well, if they hire someone to decide the fate of the other media news outlet, it seems unfair. But the thing is, it has already become a reality. The platforms are deciding on the fate of what kind of news being shown, and to shown to what extent, who are going to watch it, to what extent they're going to watch it, and they will be able to see what is being reported. So when you say not hire someone, the platform is already doing it. So the question is, has that power, Professor Shi, been shifting? Who is now making our decisions?
I think so far the mystery would be more like we call it oligopoly, or the monopoly of technology, because we know that on a platform it's really about these so-called AI, artificial intelligence, and also algorithm.
Big data.
These kind of things still remain mysterious to all of us. We don't know how this kind of system actually works. So this is probably the real danger. We have to talk about this kind of another form of monopoly.
Jessica?
Well, it's a mystery to an extent, but it's also Facebook controlling us and jerking us all around, where, there's a release out of their the Facebook newsroom that tells us, they're deprioritizing articles and prioritizing video, and then prioritizing viral video, and now they're prioritizing...
Well, they would argue, Jessica, well, that's what the customers need. That's what the viewers want. What do you say?
Yeah, well, I mean, to an extent that is true, but I think it's also, does that mean, the issue is one form is prioritized and everything else is deprioritized. Is that based on, reach and shares and comments and engagement, and is that the best model?
They need to be a lot more transparent about how their algorithms work, but at the same time, they don't have a responsibility to anybody except for their stakeholders, their shareholders.
Why wouldn't? They are being debated whether they're media outlets these days or only platforms in which media stories are being shown on them. There is a debate. So what do you make of that debate? You think they're not necessarily shouldering any responsibility of the content they're carrying?
Yeah, I think a lot of platforms are avoiding the term being a media house because it comes with the whole baggage.
Understandably.
Absolutely. But increasingly they are doing so. Increasingly they are creating their own shows, they're hosting their own content, and increasingly they're going to be held to account in the same ways. If there's going to be hate speech, bigotry, racism on their platforms, they're going to be held to account in the same way that a news organization would be.
When will that day come? When your story becoming ever more pleasant?
I think it's already happening. I think in the ability for platforms to shape enormous elections and these kinds of things, we are already seeing that transition take place.
What does that mean for you, like a practitioner on the front line?
It means we have to be diverse. It means we have to be platform agnostic. It means you've got to have an equal amount of footing in YouTube as you do in Facebook, as you do in Snapchat,
right.
so that if one of them decides tomorrow that they're going to change their algorithms, you've got two other ones to fall back on. If you are putting your entire company or your business in the interest of just one organization, you're in a very scary place.
Jessica, Huffington Post, look at that. It's a beautiful example of how social media started it. It was actually one of the textbook case studies of how it was successful. But then things changed. Capital seems to come in, a lot of it, and the fate changed. The owner of it changed as well. So now you are under a lot of different umbrellas. You're almost at the end of the production line. Do you have much space when we talk about the power shift to argue and also to work for the content that you're trying to create? What is happening to the so-called best case study of starting of a social media?
Well, yeah, that's true.
I heard a long sigh, by the way, my dear.
Yeah, I mean, HuffPost, when it started 12 years ago, that we really sort of wrote the playbook on viral news and aggregation and sort of, building communities, building mass-scale audiences. And so that was sort of our digital infancy, and since then we have matured. We have global newsrooms all over the world, which is sort of having, a finger in each pie, where we're, first and foremost, we started as a political blog, and I think we still retain those roots. People come to us
right.
for what the political conversation is of the moment, still coming to our homepage despite the fact that, the obvious social proliferation. But Facebook, HuffPost is still the number one publisher on Facebook. So I think it's sort of retaining our roots, but then still,
Can you debate with them? Can you argue with them? Can you negotiate with them about what to put, to what extent they should put?
Negotiate
with Facebook, for example.
Oh, with Facebook? Yeah, well, we're in the same building with them in New York. They're just a couple floors
Does
up.
it help?
Yeah, you would think it would, right? We share lunches. They invite us up for beers, but no.
Okay, not throwing beers at each other. That's already quite fortunate. Dinara, please.
Yes, I wanted to follow up on what Yusuf just said about being everywhere. With us, with RT, it's the same. We just try to be, we don't know where we're going to be shut down next.
That's exhausting, isn't it?
Yes.
Just be everywhere when you think there may be a possibility.
Absolutely, yes. So we want to be on YouTube, on Facebook, on Snapchat, like everywhere, because we don't know what's going to happen next,
Professor Shi, none of us, the other four of us, know what's going to happen next. What about you from an academic perspective? You really know where the world is going. Professor.
I'm not a predictor myself, but I have to admit that the academia really have very pessimistic feeling. For example, in the United States, many scholars would doubt whether Facebook would eat the world. But I think it's even more so in China, because Tencent is going to eat whole China, because Tencent is even more than aggregation of Facebook plus Instagram plus Twitter plus everything. So this is really, I think, a danger that we have to take a caution with.
I think whether we like it or not, the platforms have and will continue to win the breaking news game. Since 9/11, since the Twin Towers went down, it's been mobile phones onto platforms that have been breaking the biggest story. So what's our role going to be? It's going to be providing context and analysis. And if we're going to do that well, we're going to have to say exactly what our stance is. Huffington Post are very clear about it. They say we're liberal, we say what we are. RT are going to have to be equally clear and say this is what we represent. But we have to get rid of this nonsense idea that we are objective, that we are impartial. Actually, we all take a stand, and I think once we lay it out, we can be far more critical of what sort of commentary we provide.
I've been listening to all of your wonderful ideas, but what are we debating about? What is really playing this dominant role to decide how people are looking at things when it comes to media? Is it the capital? Is it the platform, which could also be related to the capital? Or is it the content? Is it the taste of the public? Or something else? What exactly is it, Dinara?
You know, I think that in the end, it's a consumer who decides on, you know, what to consume, basically. So even if, for example, because we are, like at RT, we are constantly sitting and thinking about, okay, what if they don't let us broadcast in the US, for example, or somewhere else? And when we think about it, there are always ways, you know, there are always means of delivering our information. As soon as people are interested in our voice, in what we produce, there will be ways, if not one platform, then the other platform. Better, of course, to have them all. So I think, yes, it's just, in the end, this is a consumer, and it's good that we live in, you know, this age when people have this capacity to decide and to watch what they like.
Really? Going to be the consumer?
You ask, what are we debating? We're debating the role of the media in 2018. Traditional and mainstream media are feeling insecure, and they have every right to do so because the publishing has been totally democratized, and we're trying to work out what role are we going to play in the future. Are we even going to be relevant anymore? I think we are. I think in this great amount of social media noise, people are going to look to experienced journalists like yourself to help identify the important stories.
But the thing is it going to get us better?
Always better. We've now got more angles, we've got more perspectives, and that means we've got more truth. And so all of these technologies, all of these platforms are only going to enable us to do better journalism.
Right. On social media, for example, the possible marriage of Prince Harry will certainly get more click than, let's just say, a disaster somewhere else, God bless, in the world. How should we understand that? Of course, that's been with us for hundreds and probably even thousands of years. That's called gossip, right? But now it becomes an important part of the pillar of the so-called your presence.
Yeah, so we're in a landscape where funny cat videos and the wedding of royalty performs better than serious news. And this means that we start to compromise our editorial integrity in order to get viral, in order to get more hits. And this is a problem. But as you say, this problem has always existed. Tabloid newspapers with the pretty girl on page 3 has always sold more than the serious newspapers. I think we have to keep doing what we always did. We have to keep doing good quality journalism, and people will be willing to pay for that.
But will it be as easy as Yusuf just said? What about a media organization, Jessica? For example, Huffington Post or somebody else?
Yeah, I mean, one of our biggest challenges that we're looking at right now is the idea of audience, and it's a buzzword, and it almost sounds elementary sometimes, but you know, for us, we're looking at, so we started, as you mentioned, you know, mass reach, digital reach, and now we're sort of looking at how can we, you know, hone smaller audiences. You know, so we're starting Facebook first communities where we're looking at how can we target really small audience, Muslim millennials, introverts. These are some of the small subgroups that we're looking at, and just doing, you know, trying to form the communities first, and that will ladder up to an editorial strategy later. But, you know, so for me, reaching out to Asian Americans, you know, so groups that traditionally haven't been targeted, you know, the media hasn't necessarily talked to them.
The niche market and the niche groups.
Yeah, so it's experimenting in different ways
That's
and thinking about
idea.
audience.
That's probably helpful, probably in the future. Professor Shi, what do you think? Coming from China's perspective.
I would argue that when we talk about power shift, it's not a power transition. It's not social media will replace traditional media as a new power. Maybe we need a kind of new mentality. So that's why earlier I said the U.S. and Russia power struggle recently is a kind of rehearsal of Cold War mentality, because U.S. Congress alluded to legislation in 1930s to accuse the RT as a foreign agent. So I think this kind of mentality has to be changed, because social media really provide a kind of platform for so-called global 99%. This is really a platform that had never occurred before. So we need a kind of new mentality for this power transition.
And you are watching our special program of World Insight with Tian Wei on CGTN. We're discussing with our colleagues from all over the world about the future of media and the shift of powers in the world. We'll be back after this. There are tectonic shifts going on today. Geopolitical powers, technological marvels, linguistic abilities, changing roles in the new media landscape. What kind of media will survive and thrive? What will be the role of a changing media today and tomorrow? At the recently concluded CGTN Global Media Summit in Sanya, I posed all these questions and many more to 4 outspoken participants. Let's meet them and hear their insights. Dinara Takutunova, Deputy Head of News at RT International. Yusuf Omar, co-founder from #OurStories. Jessica Poyce, Asian Voices Executive Editor, Huffington Post. Shi Anbing, Associate Dean of International Development with the School of Journalism and Communication at Tsinghua University. Welcome back. You're watching CGTN's World Insight with Tianwei special program. We are talking about the shifts of powers in the world and how is it going to influence the nature of media for the future. When we talk about power shifts, another power shift we haven't talked about, which some of you touched on. So let's face it. These days, capital speaks a lot. Not only in the so-called capitalist society, but also in socialist society with Chinese characteristics. What is going to be the future like? If you see some of the international broadcasters, let's just take TV as an example, and social media too. RT, Al Jazeera, CGTN, Voice of America, Deutsche Welle, ARD, or PBS. Many of them have been having funding coming from the government or different divisions of the government. And therefore, some argue they have less concerns about money. And therefore, they say, these media organizations will be able to jump on probably some of the most important stories, and yet the stories that might not be able to sell and be so successful as the marriage of the Prince Harry on the media scene. But what would that mean? That government seems to play a role these days about the coverage of international news and the international story. I want to go to you first, Professor Shi. Help us understand this.
I guess, like I said before, we need to change this stereotypical mentality, because when we said government-funded media, official media would be a kind of unreliable media. I think it used to be a sort of stereotype that Western journalism has given or has actually pressure on the global professionals. So in this sense, I would rather say that we probably will argue for public media. Because whether it's funded by government or by corporation, whether it's actually serves the public interest. So the public media would be the ideal model for future global media organizations.
I see. What about you, Dinara, coming from RT's perspective? Or
Well,
you yourself as a practitioner?
I don't want to be mistaken, but BBG gets funded like 10 times more than RT, for example. And especially every big power has its international media which is sponsored by this power, by this country, but only RT is blamed for that, like a double standards or something like that.
You don't think it's relevant to you, that kind of question? Whether states play a role these days in the international broadcasting or international media coverage? Professor Shi just said the mindset has to be changed. It is not just about so-called state versus the private ones. It is much more than that.
I agree with that, absolutely.
I see. Jessica, what do you think?
Well,
another long sigh. A lot of tough questions these days.
Very important.
Yeah. Well, I think, Facebook, the fact that it's almost like we have to stop the bleeding with the fake news issue, because it's such a distraction. It's like one of the top 50 Facebook stories, like Obama's birth certificate. That story was one of the most viral last year, and it's so that's such a distraction from these news outlets, Huffington Post, Washington Post, New York Times. We're all doing good stories, and these stories are going to remain. So it's just a matter of we say, diversifying emerging platforms, finding new platforms to publish on, not being beholden to Facebook. And so, we don't know the answer. Maybe Yusuf will find it for us.
That's one example. Another example is about President Trump traveling to Japan, and he was trying to feed the fish, so-called, and he was caught by throwing the fish into the water, but the media did not report it about his Japanese counterpart the first, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there are a lot of viral moments from that trip. There was another moment where...
Give me some examples so
where
that our viewers know.
Yeah, well, the President of China had his hands in his pocket, and then there was a moment that the camera caught him taking his hands out when Trump looked at him, and people interpreted that as, oh, you know, so China's still under the thumb of the U.S. But then other people interpret it differently, and I think that's a good example of, like, people, you know, it's confirmation bias. People read into things how they want to, and so that's an example where, you know, analysis and reporting and straight facts and that kind of thing are critical.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir?
I think public service broadcasters play an enormous role in an age where it's so difficult to monetize journalism, and huge parts of the world get ignored. Like the African continent, you see CGTN doing lots of coverage in Africa. You see BBC doing lots of coverage in India. So I think public service broadcasters have a massive role to play. But the big difference is whether they are funded by the state or whether they're funded by the people. And this has huge implications for how editorially independent they can be.
So you think there is a huge difference between that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at the BBC is funded by the British taxpayer, so they are not accountable to the Prime Minister or the government in power at the time, which allows them to be far more autonomous, to be far more critical of their government. And the only way you're going to gain the trust of the audience as a public service broadcaster is if you can be a real neutral source of news.
Professor Shi, I guess you need to respond to that.
Yeah, I would say what happened to U.S. recently, particularly about Trump's attitude toward the media, actually proved one truism, that there's no single media model for everyone. So at least even this kind of so-called U.S.-based market-driven model was actually challenged by Trump himself. So this is really what we need to think, that in this process of power shift, we need to guarantee a kind of diversity of power model or power, the development model. So this, I think the so-called significance of China model is simply because China has no model. Because China always tries to testing new models. As you said, the socialism with Chinese characteristics or capitalism with Chinese characteristics is actually transcend from this traditional stereotypical power transition that has actually laid on us a sort of like a mentality or stagnation of mentality.
So what Professor Shi was trying to say to me is about how much really these days in journalism, in media as a whole, the spirit of pragmatism is at play. I don't know about that. I want to have your opinions about that. Are we so narcissist, as some have accused us of? Are we, or have we been pampered for so long because we are the only one that have the tool of telling people what is going on, and now we're being challenged? Or are we right now in the urgent need of updating ourselves with skills, technologies, new mindsets? What exactly is it? Dinara?
Well, I think that's what we are doing, basically. It doesn't matter, in terms of competition, it doesn't matter who you are funded by and how much money you get. I mean, ratings speak for themselves, and as I said, consumer is the one who chooses. And in our times, we have so many technologies, we have so many platforms. I mean, you know, you can be everywhere and still be nowhere, or you can be precise and interesting in the ways that you do that. So I just think that, yes, competitiveness is very high, and it's, you know, up to every single media to be competitive and about that.
Has the golden days gone? Jessica?
Well, you asked if we've been pampered. I mean, yeah, I think so. To be honest, I think HuffPost and BuzzFeed and Mashable and, you know, all of these sort of disruptors to legacy media, you know, like we felt like we owned the internet, and up until like 2013, we sort of did, and then everyone else came onto the scene, and then it's like, there was this big, now we're sharing the pie. And so that means figuring out, like I said, new audiences, new content models, new business models. Everyone's obsessed with VR, AR right now, and like rightfully so, it's the new thing. You made a whole series of videos around neglected diseases that affect the poorest people in the world. An interesting model with a sponsor and, still maintaining editorial independence. So it's just experimenting like that.
BuzzFeed, Vice, their profit is falling shortage of the expectations of the market, much shorter, 20% to even 30% of this year. On the other hand, The Guardian, which is a so-called left paper in the UK, has been winning readership. Earlier, last year, only 12,000. This year, all kinds of subscriptions, going much higher than that. They will be able to make profits as a result, just membership and subscription. So a lot of mixed news, really, these days about how media is working on. What do you say about this interesting change of phenomenon that we are seeing almost every day, every year?
Yeah, the big question is, where's the money online? And I think we try to take television-style techniques and apply them to online. Let's put a pre-roll advert on and we'll make money. Let's put a mid-roll advert on, we'll make money. When in actuality, we are now seeing money coming from a distribution of channels, from content marketing, sponsored ads, a whole bunch of spaces.
Yeah.
We need to drastically become a lot more flexible with where we're going to make money online. Because otherwise it's getting really tough. Subscription is getting interesting. I've just come from Norway and Scandinavia. All of the big titles there are making money from subscriptions. People are paying membership.
It is not just the money that matters, but also the relevancy that really matters, I guess, to media people. That people are doing subscriptions, people are coming to your platform. That's something important. Professor Shi, what do you make of all these ever-evolving changes?
We talk about diversity, but I think consensus is equally important. So what we mean, actually, social media provide a kind of platform for dialogue between different ideologies or value system. Imagine if there is no YouTube, RT could not achieve success of this skill, like if we still stay in a traditional model of broadcasting. And the CGTN now have the greatest number of Facebook followers. So it is actually, I think we have that platform, but the important thing is that how we actually can achieve the true dialogue between different civilizations through the
We are
platforms.
really running out of time. We had a fascinating discussion after a long day of discussion already. But before we go, since we are here, our viewers might not know, but we are here, all of us, to celebrate this gathering of media people from 100 media organizations, 45 countries and regions on this first ever CGTN Global Media Summit. What would you like to be the takeaway of both the summit and for you, for your daily work? Let's go with Dinara first.
I think that the most important for me is to talk about supporting each other, for all the media to support each other concerning what's happening with the supposed ranking, for example, on Google, or probably some promo campaigns which RT was denied recently on Twitter, for example. And I've been discussing it with colleagues, it's very important to pay attention to that, because what's happening to some media organizations now can happen later with others. So we should have a strong stance on that.
I see. Yusuf.
We've got to get more and more perspectives. It makes us more intelligent. I think we need to listen to the voice of China through CCTV and CGTN. We need to be listening to RT. We need to be listening to Huffington Post. That's the only way we're going to really have an idea.
And how about listening to Yusuf, too?
Yeah, we need to listen to communities. We need to get back down to humans and communities on the ground and hear their stories again. I think we've spent too long listening to polls and pundits and commentators and experts who ended up not being accurate about predicting elections and all sorts of results. We need to get back down to the people and diversify the kind of media that we consume.
as the slogan goes, just do it. Listen to different sources. Jessica.
That's true. Yeah, I agree with what you said. I think, if there's any kind of silver lining from the election, it would be that, the media is kind of doing a post-mortem on itself and, asking hard questions. Have we been too insular? Are we listening to our readers? Are we growing our readership? And how can we do it better? How can we listen to the people who are telling us that they feel marginalized or left out? And that's happening across the board, and that's a good thing.
And not do it in a nationalistic way either. So all these are challenges, how to do, all these lists of hows. And Professor Shi, last but certainly not least.
Okay, as a journalist educator myself, I really have this very optimistic prediction for journalism, because this is really a golden age for journalism. So many people take part in journalism, and also we have like mobile journalists as a very important phenomenon. So having said that, I would say this global media was a truly global media, because we really have participants from all over the world, not just merely from the UK, US, duopoly of the old global communication order. So in the future, as a journalism professor myself, I still think students would get a lot of inspiration from the event like this, because we still think the golden day of journalism will persist, the golden day of global media will persist.
And it is all of us here on the stage that is responsible for what they're reading today, which would decide the future for all of us in the very near future, I guess. But for now, I want to thank my 3 colleagues coming from different parts of the world. Dinara, Yusuf, Jessica, thank you so much. And Professor Shi Anbing coming from Tsinghua University. Really appreciate it, ladies and gentlemen. Enjoy yourself here in China.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we're coming to the end of our special program here in Sanya on the site of the first ever CGTN Global Media Summit, Shifting Our Powers and the Future of Media. I'm Tian Wei. Make sure to find us on different social media platforms, and certainly search for us, World Insight with Tian Wei, in your search engine. On behalf of all our team here in Sanya for the special program and those back in Beijing, thank you, and I'll see you tomorrow.